This is the latest from 7 News with Melissa Doyle.
Good evening and welcome. It appears our efforts are paying off, with new infection rates dropping to their lowest point in 6 weeks. But police are still taking no chances. Helicopter raids and kids' birthday bust-ups, the elaborate operations to enforce social distancing. Virgin's final stand with voluntary administration all but confirmed what it means for the future of Australian travel. The 3 things you need to check before downloading the government's COVID-19 tracing app. And named and shamed, Harry and Meghan take on the tabloid newspapers as the Duchess prepares for her next TV gig. Australia reached a remarkable milestone today in our battle against COVID-19. It's a turn in our curve we've been waiting for. So let's bring in senior reporter Denham Hitchcock to take a look. And Denham, what does this mean?
Well, Mel, it means these restrictions are working and we are starting to see the results. So let's take a look at the curve because it shows our national infection rate over the past 10 days. Now, not so long ago, we were in the 300s, now this. Today, we had just 13 infections. And in 3 states, Queensland, WA, South Australia, we recorded 0 infections. 0. We are starting to see small things like some beaches reopen, and this smell should continue.
I noticed New Zealand is planning to lift some of their restrictions. How do we compare to them?
Well, let's take a look at the Kiwis over the same 10-day period, and you can see they've been low for a long time now, 7 new cases today. Now, New Zealand has some of the world's toughest restrictions. All parks, beaches, schools, construction work, even takeaway food, all closed. But from next week, their restrictions will be similar to what Australia is now. And if this curve continues, Mel, there will be enormous pressure on both governments to chart our way out, and soon.
All right, well, we're waiting to hear. Denham, thank you. Queensland is one of those states which recorded 0 new cases overnight, 81 days after the virus first appeared within its borders. Joel Dry is in Brisbane for us tonight. And Joel, what's the reaction been to this news?
Oh, Mel, there's a great sense of excitement here in Queensland about what this could mean, and I think also a sense of achievement in getting us to this point. As you mentioned, it's been 81 days since our first case here, but it's actually been 42 days since we've had a 24-hour period with no new infections of coronavirus. Back then, on March 9, things went up, and they went up very quickly. We got to a peak of more than 70 cases in one day, but then things plateaued and tumbled perhaps quicker than anyone thought they would, getting us to this point now. Obviously, that's a lot to do with the restrictions that have been put in place by the government. So obviously, people now want to know, when will we lift these restrictions? Today, the Premier said this is a good news story. We still need to be cautious, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. If we can perhaps stay this way for a couple of weeks, then restrictions may be lifted.
Which will be a relief to many, including all of those in the first day of the new school term today. Most kids learning from home, but how did they go? Not everything went smoothly, I understand.
No, this was not such a good news story for the government, Mel. As you said, day 1 of term 2, and about 88% of school children were doing at-home learning. They all got onto the Education Queensland website called Learning from Home. Simply too many people. It crashed, and kids spent more time trying to deal with IT issues than actually learning what they're supposed to be. So the government has said they always expected some teething problems. This was far more than teething problems. This was a debacle, and one that they have spent most of the day trying to iron out, in the hope that when kids get back into their classroom, their kitchen table, and then they log on, perhaps tomorrow, they might be able to actually learn something.
Yeah, all right. There'll be mums and dads hoping. Thanks so much, Joel, for that update tonight. A terrible incident. That is how the boss of Carnival Australia, which owns the Ruby Princess, described the debacle surrounding the ship. Amber Laidler is live in Sydney this evening. Amber, just run us through what's the latest on this.
Well, Mel, another 19 crew members tested positive today. It takes the total number of infected people on board the Ruby Princess to almost 200. The cruise ship is at the centre of what is expected to be one of the largest and most complex investigations in our state's history after it was allowed to dock here at the Overseas Passenger Terminal on March 19. It's 2,700 passengers allowed to disembark and told they wouldn't be required to self-isolate. late. We now know the ship has been linked to 21 deaths and almost 1,000 cases worldwide. In fact, one of the initial 2 passengers to test positive to COVID-19, we've learnt remains tonight in a coma. She has been separated from her husband for 30 days. Today is the pair's 35th wedding anniversary. The operator, Princess Cruises, is now facing multiple lawsuits. It is denying any allegations of criminal negligence, instead referring to this scandal as a terrible tragedy.
Has your company put profits over people?
Terrible incident, terrible tragedy all over the world, impacting people, passengers, crew members and their families.
But why did that cruise go ahead on March 8th?
As you know, there's an investigation going on, and it would be inappropriate for me to...
Will you apologise to the families of the victims?
Now, the Ruby Princess remains docked at Port Kembla, south of Sydney. It was due to leave Australian waters on Sunday, but that was pushed back. It is now expected to leave this coming Thursday, Mel.
All right, we will see what happens. Amber, thank you very much. Now, Victorian police have shut down an 8-year-old's birthday party and handed out more than $26,000 in fines to guests for breaking social distancing measures. Estelle Griepink joins me from Melbourne now. And Estelle, what do we know about this party?
Good evening to you, Mel. Well, this 8-year-old birthday party took place in the wealthy suburb of Boris yesterday afternoon, and some residents have told us they initially thought it was an auction because there were so many people gathered out the front. Dozens of parents and children were there, standing quite close to each other and clearly flouting social distancing rules. All up, 16 people were hit with a $1,600 fine. Here's what one neighbour had to say.
I think we might have...
in the past 4 weeks...
Sorry, Estelle, you go. I was just saying I think we didn't get that grab, but you go.
Oh, Mel, I was just going to say that in the past 4 weeks, Victoria Police have actually done 25,000 spot checks, and it's not just that Boris birthday party I was speaking of, but also a 20-year-old man they've spoken to recently. He was told to go home 5 times in the last 5 hours, so some people are not getting the message.
5, my gosh. Well, thank you very much for that update tonight there in Melbourne. Estelle, thank you. Now, meanwhile, this is the moment Queensland Police busted an unlawful rooftop gathering on the Gold Coast. A trio attempted to run away when they were confronted by police in the chopper, but with the building surrounded, all 3 were issued $1,300 fines for breaching social distancing rules, fined for trespassing, and 2 were charged with drug possession. And the limit on takeaway alcohol introduced in March has been officially lifted in WA. The controversial restrictions were put in place 3 weeks ago to stop panic buying and keep alcohol-related medical issues out of hospitals. The decision to lift the ban was welcomed by local liquor sellers. In the last few hours, it's been revealed that Virgin Australia is headed for voluntary administration. But what does it mean for the future of Australian aviation? Network Finance Editor Gemma Acton and travel expert James Wilkinson join me now. Thank you very much. Gemma, just run us through then what we know so far tonight.
Well, Mel, Virgin Australia's board and management has been scrambling around for weeks now trying to find enough cash to save the airline. And from what we understand, they had a board meeting this afternoon where they declared defeat effectively. We're expecting to hear tomorrow morning a formal announcement that they will be going into voluntary administration. And it's believed that Deloitte were appointed as administrators this evening. Now, this would see Deloitte continue to work with potential buyers to buy out some parts of the Virgin business and hopefully relaunch on the other side as another type of viable airline. And it's thought that there are actually several potential buyers interested, a combination of airlines and private equity buyers, and even suggestions that we might see some teaming up between airlines and private equity buyers to make bids. Now, we don't know yet what the resultant business will look like on the other side. There's still a process to be run, obviously, but it's believed that while this process is running, Virgin's reduced schedule will continue.
OK. James, we all remember when Virgin appeared on the scene and sort of shook things up. How big a blow is this for Australian travellers?
Well, I think it's quite a big blow at the moment. Now, if you look back to that time you're talking about, which is when Ansett went under a few days after September 11 in 2001, Virgin was already on the scene. They launched in August 2000. What we don't have right now is another carrier in the wings, do we? We've got two big corporations here. We've got Qantas Group with Jetstar, and we've obviously got Virgin with Tigers. So it's a very different landscape we're having. I mean, if you look at the last 12 months for Virgin, the Managing Director, Paul Scar, has done a wonderful job in restructuring the airline to pull out of some unprofitable routes. So I think what we'll see in the interim will be reducing even further routes once we actually can start travelling again. I think we'll see, Virgin still wanting to operate on some of the big trunk routes, the corporate routes, but I think some of the smaller routes, regional routes and leisure routes will be at stake here, even under the new ownership, and we'll see what happens with that. And the other big key thing is what happens to things like frequent flyer points as well, Mel, and looking at what happens into Tiger. I mean, they're the ultra low-cost model of Virgin here, so we're talking two airlines at stake here, not just one.
Yeah. Gemma, who will be the winners and losers then from Virgin's demise?
Well, Mel, generally in a restructure, it's equity holders who go first. That's the 4 foreign airline owners who own about 20% each, and then Richard Branson's group that owns around 10%, as well as the 10% that's listed on our local share market. The huge problem that Virgin has had was a $5.3 billion program is the debt that no buyer has wanted to touch. So the idea will be to whittle this down to a level that makes Virgin attractive again to potential buyers. So really looking to the debt holders to also take a bit of a hit there. And then to James's point, we don't know yet what's going to happen to Velocity frequent flyers, but that is a very valuable program for Virgin. So it's certainly hoped that that would emerge in some form on the other side.
Well, we'll see what happens tomorrow, and then I'm sure we'll be talking to both of you again about it all very, very soon. So thanks so much, Gemma and James.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Mel.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is eyeing off a return to Downing Street days after recovering from COVID-19. Europe Bureau Chief Hugh Whitfield joins us. And Hugh, Boris Johnson is recovering, could be back on deck as soon as next week, so clearly he must be doing okay.
Well, Mel, I think he's itching to get back. I think his colleagues are itching for him to get back as well. We do know he's continuing to recover, though, at Chequers, the Prime Minister's country residence with his pregnant fiancée. He's now beginning to take part in video meetings, including a 2-hour video call with the man who is standing in as Prime Minister in Boris Johnson's absence, Dominic Raab. That was last Friday, and there is a real push from some members of the Cabinet to get Boris Johnson back behind the helm to try and steer Britain through this ongoing coronavirus crisis. Big questions, though, about how serious Boris Johnson was taking all of this earlier in the year. He missed 5 key national security meetings. They're called Cobra briefings at Downing Street. Questions about whether Boris Johnson should have been there and why he wasn't, and where exactly he was during all of that going on. Some people believe that he was essentially MIA and needed to take charge earlier, and Britain could have been better prepared. There is now a severe shortage of protective equipment for nurses. They're awaiting a shipment coming in from Turkey today, and some hospitals are essentially running out of those gowns that nurses need to protect them from coronavirus patients. So a lot of work here still to be done.
Over the weekend, Hugh, Europe passed a grim milestone, 100,000 deaths. The continent is still split, though, on the easing of lockdowns, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, some countries are still experiencing hundreds of deaths a day. Spain, the UK, Italy, France. Germany, though, has been lauded around the world for its handling of the coronavirus crisis. It is beginning tentative steps to reopen parts of the economy. They are beginning with shops like bookshops and some school students being allowed to return today, but not many. Other countries like Poland, the Czech Republic and Norway are also opening some parks and some retail businesses to try and get people outside again and money flowing. But then you look at France and Spain, where the coronavirus is still killing hundreds of people a day, as I say, and France is staring down the barrel of many more weeks of severe lockdown, which even include people being able to not go outside during certain hours. They're that severe.
Wow. And tell us about the statement from the Duke of Edinburgh, a rather special one.
Yeah, look, we so rarely hear from Prince Philip these days since he retired from public life back in 2017. He is 99 in just a few weeks and still has affiliations with about 750 groups across the UK, many of them science and healthcare based. He's released this statement saying, "I wanted to recognise the vital and urgent work being done by so many to tackle the pandemic, by those in the medical and scientific professions. I also wanted to thank all key workers who ensure the infrastructure of our life continues," and he included among them garbage collectors. So clearly a lot of people on his mind. The Queen and Prince Philip are essentially in lockdown at Windsor Castle. We know that some members of the royal family have been taking part in family video calls on Zoom as well, so they're keeping in touch, scattered around the UK. Mel.
All right, Hugh, thanks very much for that update. And we've got a little bit of more royal news later on. It was a big day in the UK today, so thank you, Hugh Whitfeld. Now, tensions over plans to reopen the US have escalated as state leaders refuse to ease restrictions until they have sufficient testing supplies. But President Trump has maintained that there are more than enough swabs to go around.
We continue to procure millions of swabs. Test collectors, I have something here, just happen to have it's a swab. Looks innocent, not very complicated. This is what it's about, right? Does it remind you of something? It reminds you of this, right? One's a swab, one's a Q-tip.
We can control the beast, yes, but the beast is still alive. We did not kill the beast. And the beast can rise up again.
Well, US Bureau Chief Ashley Mullaney is live in New York. And Ashley, why is testing causing such a stir at the moment?
Well, we're definitely seeing some of these state governors, Mel, at odds with the president. On one hand, we have the White House saying there's enough tests to go around to warrant reopening the states. Governors like Andrew Cuomo here in New York says that's simply not the case, that they need more federal assistance to get these test kits out and rolled out in these states. At the moment, there's about 150,000 Americans every day being tested. Researchers say that needs to triple before we can get a really accurate picture.
Tell us about the protests that are still around the US demanding an end to lockdown, but now we're seeing healthcare workers getting involved.
Yeah, these pictures we saw captured from a photojournalist in Denver, Colorado. What appears to be nurses in scrubs and N95 masks standing in front of these anti-lockdown protesters. And we're seeing these protests pop up all around the country, largely in red states, but these are Americans who are desperate to get back to work. And the concern from health experts is that in doing so, that they're defying these public health and safety orders. They're not wearing masks, they're not social distancing, and the president has said it will be up to individual states to reopen, but then he's writing on Twitter to liberate them as well, and doesn't seem overly concerned about these protests, saying that they simply have cabin fever and that they desperately want to get back to work. But of course, the concern being that they might not be doing that safely, Mel.
Oh, yeah, those images of healthcare workers just standing in front of vehicles in their scrubs. Ashley, thanks very much for that update. Yeah, from the US tonight. Now, applications for the government's JobKeeper scheme opened today, and there was a flurry of interest from across all business sectors. The ATO produced a snapshot analysis of employers who plan to apply, and there are some surprises. Network Finance editor Gemma Acton is back. And Gemma, who is eligible for this wage subsidy?
Well, Mel, any company or sole trader with yearly turnover of up to $1 billion that can demonstrate a 30% downturn can claim the $1,500 cash payment per employee per fortnight. If your turnover is above $1 billion, you need to show a 50% decline. Among companies, which make up 40% of applications, those most interested are micro companies with annual turnover of under $2 million. Individual or sole traders account for another 40%. Breaking the likely applicants into states States reveals that New South Wales is leading the clamour for compensation with 35% of expected claims. Victoria's at 27% and Queensland 19%. Then there's a big drop to Western Australia with just 9%. The remaining states have even lower rates. But the really interesting dissection is looking at which industries are likely to apply. Right up at the top is the so-called white-collar workforce, the professionals who account for 14% of expected applicants. That includes lawyers, accountants, management consultants, along with scientific professionals and those who work in technology. They're closely followed by construction workers. Accommodation and food services, the hotels, pubs and cafes, are midway down with just under 7%. Arts and recreation services and educational make up around 3%. But remember, applications are made per business, not per employee. So this data doesn't reflect how many workers each business will be applying on behalf of.
Gemma, thank you. Now, still to come, a cybersecurity expert tells us what we need to know before downloading the government's coronavirus tracking app. Health authorities reveal what it will take to get the AFL season back in business. Harry and Meghan launch another attack on the British tabloids, and spreading cheer, not COVID-19. The Australian family using their time in isolation to brighten up the neighbourhood. That is next on the latest from 7 News. Well, the government claims a soon-to-be-released mobile phone app will be crucial in protecting lives and ending our current restrictions. But it's opened up a huge debate on privacy. Reporter Denham Hitchcock is back to take a look at this. And Denham, are we right to be sceptical?
Always be sceptical, Mel, but after that, do the research and ask the right questions. The app is already being used in Singapore and it's what they call open source, which means anyone can look at the code or how it works. I asked one of Australia's top cybersecurity experts, Shannon Sedgwick, to take a look at it for us. Shannon, let's get right to it. Should we be worried about this app?
Listen, I think there's a lot of misinformation going around at the moment. I think it's admirable that people are concerned about their data privacy and data security, and we should always be mindful of that. But we have to remember that we give away far more data than this app is proposing to use on a daily basis.
So how does this app actually work?
It uses Bluetooth Low Energy, or BLE. It's the same as when you connect your Apple Watch to your phone. That's Bluetooth Low Energy. That BLE, or the Bluetooth, connects with devices in your proximity. It doesn't track your location. There's a fear around the location tracking. It doesn't do that. It tracks what other phones that have this app downloaded that's within proximity with it for more than 15 minutes. If you get sick, or if somebody that you've been in contact with for longer than 15 minutes gets sick, they go to a doctor, they have their test, and then the doctor asks them, are you using this app? They enter in a code saying, yes, I am now contagious, or I am sick, and that is sent to a database, and it sends out an automatic text to all of the people who have been in contact with that infected person for longer than 15 minutes. The person getting that text doesn't know who it came from, where they were in contact with that person, and they don't get any other personal details.
But we have to download it from somewhere, so someone must have access to our identity.
Yes, well, and we have to look at this from perspective. You know, we order food daily, we buy things online, and we give away far more information and personal information in every single one of those transactions. The difference being, instead of getting your beef rendang at the door, you're getting the opportunity to help save somebody's life. But this is where communication is vitally important. The government needs to answer some questions and make it very clear to the public exactly what data is being gleaned from the users, where is the data being stored, what security controls are in place to protect that data, and who has access to that data.
So, Shannon, you're a cybersecurity expert. Would you download it to your phone?
If the data is anonymised, then yes, most certainly. I'll be downloading it. I'll encourage my family to, and I think the wider public should do it.
Yes or no, would you advise Barnaby Joyce to download it to his phone?
Listen, I congratulate Barnaby on his privacy-minded attitude towards his data. But like I said, I think we need to be unemotional and we need to look at the facts of this. the risk is low and the reward is potentially great.
Shannon, thank you very much. Thanks for the explanation.
Thanks, Denham.
So that was new to me. The app does not record your location or even who you are. Mel, the government looks like they have the product, but do they have the sales pitch to sell it?
It's going to be a big sell. Denham, thank you. Todd Greenberg has resigned as NRL CEO effective immediately. After weeks of speculation, a statement confirmed the decision was mutually agreed between Greenberg and the ARL Commission. Last month, Rugby League Central sent 95% of its staff home following the suspension of the NRL season. Victoria's health officials have revealed what it will take to get AFL back in business. Gillon McLachlan was told for the season to restart, they must put forward a proposal on how games will be played during the pandemic. The catch? Every state must be on board. The competition is shut down until at least May 31. It has been a whirlwind few days for the royal family. Cancelled birthdays, tabloid wars and Meghan Markle's return to TV. Royal commentator Victoria Arbiter joins us with more from New York. And Victoria, Meghan Markle is making her first TV appearance since stepping back from public duties. So what will she be doing?
Yes, Meghan is due to appear on Good Morning America. Good Morning America came on at 7 a.m. this morning here in New York, and we've got about half an hour left in the show, and that interview hasn't aired yet, which suggests this is not the groundbreaking interview that everyone was hoping for. Actually, the programme was criticised yesterday for over-promising in its tease of Meghan appearing on the show. People had hoped she'd be talking about Donald Trump, their security, their move to LA, their relationship with the royal family. But in fact, Meghan is going to be talking about the narration she did for Disney nature film Elephant, which launched on Disney Plus back on April 3rd. We understand that Meghan's interview is just going to be along with clips of Elephant, and I expect this interview probably should have aired 3 weeks ago, but it was shelved because of news breaking over coronavirus. So her fans, of course, still very excited to hear from her, but it's going to be all about Elephant and nothing more juicy than that.
OK. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have also issued a scathing open letter to 4 major British tabloids promising never to work with them again. So what has prompted this?
Now, this was an extraordinary letter that was sent out yesterday. The papers in question are The Sun, the Daily Mail, the Express and the Daily Mirror. The ban in terms of Harry and Meghan's interaction with these editors and these newspapers extends to their online versions and the Sunday editions as well. And it's interesting that they've decided to do this now. They have been criticised today for talking about their grievances with the tabloids in the midst of a global pandemic. But actually, the timing does have good reason. This coming Friday, a virtual hearing will launch, and it's the first in Meghan's war, I suppose, against the Daily Mail and its decision to publish a letter written to her father. It was published unlawfully. Meghan, as the writer of that letter, actually maintains the copyright. So that court case begins in terms of its first hearing on Friday. And I think also this letter to these editors was designed as a signal to say to members of the public, if you see stories about us in these newspapers, chances are they're not true. Harry and Meghan have said they will not engage with these newspapers anymore. And what that really means is that they won't answer any emails, they won't answer any phone calls, and they refuse to have anything to do with those particular papers moving forwards. Now, the tabloids hate to be called out, so I think it's possible that they are going to double down, and we may see stories on the couple start to increase. And this is why the royals very rarely take on the tabloids.
Yeah, it's going to be full-on war now. Victoria, thanks very much for that update tonight.
Thank you, Mel.
Well, still to come, the family having a very merry isolation. Why this Australian household went very early with their Christmas lights. That is next on the latest from 7 News. Welcome back. Now, every spring, Keukenhof Park in the Netherlands hosts a world-famous tulip festival. And right now, the flowers are in bloom. They're beautiful. The only thing missing, the visitors. Luckily, the park has shared a video tour around the gardens so people don't miss out. So we'll keep it up and have a look at the temperatures around the country. Brisbane mostly sunny and 28. A sunny morning in Melbourne with a top of 20. 24 and some cloud in Adelaide and 34 and sunny in Darwin. And in other parts of the country, 25 and cloudy in Bourke, 20 and a few showers in Warrnambool, and a mostly sunny 35 degrees in Karratha. Now, it is normally frowned upon to put your Christmas lights up before December the 1st, but how about in April? One family in Sydney has done just that. Father and son, Rowan and Alexi Stewart, decided to put up their annual festive display a few weekends ago, complete with a 6-metre Santa Claus. They hoped their efforts would cheer up the neighbours in isolation.
This took us about 5 hours on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, my son and I, Alexi, just thought, put a little bit of fun back into the environment, get the lights up, give something to people to look at, have a laugh and take a bit of interest in.
Well, a bit of festive light amid all the recent darkness, just what everyone needs. And that is why the Stewart family's home is tonight our final frame. Thank you for your company this evening. From the team here at 7 News, that is the latest. I'm Melissa Doyle. Good night.